It's just not there yet. We got there with medical marijuana. I just don't believe the science is there. I don't believe we should be experimenting on 5,000 people.
Lawmakers now have less than a month to pass bills. One bill hanging on could decriminalize a handful of psychedelic drugs like magic mushrooms.
More importantly, the bill does not change laws against growing or selling.
Well, that's why this bill isn't a legalization bill. This bill is a decriminalization of a small amount.
A task force is recommending the decriminalization of magic mushrooms.
Psilocybin mushrooms show evidence they may improve mental health.
Those magic mushrooms.
5 psychedelics are now decriminalized right here in Colorado, and what's known as psilocybin therapy is now legal in the state.
Now in today's show, we're going from coast to coast as California is on track to launch a new mushroom access program for veterans and first responders. And Connecticut lawmakers also file a bill to decriminalize psilocybin despite the governor's concerns. So we're going to have a look at that today, see which states are following suit, because it seems that there's a wave of magic mushrooms that's taking over America as many states are now following suit. All that and more in today's show, but let's start off right here in Cali, where there's actually a medical access program for veterans and first responders.
Lawmakers now have less than a month to pass bills. One bill hanging on could decriminalize a handful of psychedelic drugs like magic mushrooms. Becca Habegger explores who is for it, who is against it, and what comes next.
My name is Jason Moore Brown. I live in Placer County with my beautiful wife and 5 children. I'm a decorated Army officer and a combat veteran.
Brown testified recently in favor of a bill that would decriminalize certain natural hallucinogens.
I deployed 3 times in support of the global war on terror from 2000 to 2008. Receiving 2 Bronze Star medals for my actions.
He says he returned from war with post-traumatic stress disorder and recently sought treatment through the guided use of hallucinogens.
As hard as the last 15 years have been on my family and me, I consider myself fortunate. Many of my brothers and sisters have succumbed to the darkness, never having found the therapeutic benefit of the plant medicines this bill will decriminalize.
But this bill drew emotional testimony on both sides.
I have personally experienced the devastating consequences of psilocybin and believe it would be dangerous and irresponsible to allow their unregulated recreational and widespread use.
Lisa Hudson is a Bay Area mom whose 16-year-old son died in 2020 after he took magic mushrooms and, while hallucinating, ran off the family's deck.
Shane was a vibrant and ambitious young man with a bright future ahead of him, but his experimentation with psychedelic drugs led to his untimely death.
She's part of a group called the Coalition for Psychedelic Safety and Education. They say they're not totally against the decriminalization of these substances, but they say this bill goes too far, too fast, with not enough safety regulations.
California should lead in decriminalizing the possession and use of these substances.
The bill's author, Democratic State Senator Scott Wiener of San Francisco, says SB 58 would decriminalize personal possession and use of 5 non-synthetic hallucinogens.
Psilocybin, psilocin, DMT, mescaline, and ibogaine. The bill only applies to people 21 and older, and it also does not decriminalize the sale of these substances.
While magic mushrooms are illegal in most of the country, Colorado and Oregon are currently the only states that have fully decriminalized their use, while 4 other states have decriminalized the drug within certain cities, including Oakland and Santa Cruz here in California.
So you guys can see this is still a touchy subject, and a lot of people have differing views when it comes to this particular issue. It's not widespread as legalization just yet, but we are noticing a trend where a lot of lawmakers are actually having it on their mind as something that they can potentially decriminalize in the future. You guys would have just heard one of the veterans speak about this when he was discussing PTSD and those types of issues, and according to this article, this program would allow veterans and first responders access to these mushrooms. Now, despite us seeing efforts to push through this new bipartisan bill, efforts like this have failed in the past, so let's have a look at this clip.
Scott Wiener introduced a new piece of legislation aiming to decriminalize certain psychedelic drugs, including mushrooms. This marks the second time the state senator has tried to get a bill similar to this through the Senate. The measure, SB 58, would make it legal in the state to possess certain naturally occurring hallucinogens for personal use if you're 21 years old or older. Senator Wiener described current laws banning the possession of the plant-based psychedelics as bad policy, calling it a continuation of the war on drugs. The bill so far receiving support from several groups in the mental health community, including those focused on treating veterans with PTSD and depression.
On average, 18 veterans in this country commit suicide every single day. That is unacceptable and it is avoidable. These People have put their lives on the line for our country, and we need to support them. And what we are doing here today with Senate Bill 58 will help support the mental health of our veterans.
And a recent study by researchers at Johns Hopkins University found that hallucinogenic mushrooms given to cancer patients help treat their anxiety and depression. Pushback against the bill is expected to come from a number of law enforcement associations.
So from that, it's clear that there are benefits, but it really needs to be managed properly when it comes to a rollout of this nature. Now, somewhere that has rolled this out and decriminalized a while back is Colorado. We'll have a look at Colorado in a bit, but let's head over to Connecticut, where they're also proposing a bill to decriminalize psilocybin mushrooms.
Lawmakers are considering lowering the penalty on small amounts of psilocybin, the drug in psychedelic mushrooms.
Yeah, it's pretty similar to when the state decriminalized marijuana years before that drug became legal. NBC political reporter Mike Sabino is live from the Legislative Office building. And Mike, who is behind this push?
Well, there's growing research that psilocybin can help with mental health issues. So some of those patients came here today to say that this would help them treat themselves. Now, I should warn you that the advocate you're about to hear from talks openly about suicide.
Mental health agencies are not supplying, the correct treatments, or they can't help enough people.
Since the COVID pandemic, doctors have struggled to keep up with the rising need for mental health treatments. Victor Constanza knows. He was struggling for years with PTSD and problems with alcohol. He couldn't find a treatment that worked until he tried psilocybin last summer. He says his life would be worse off without it.
Wasting my life with alcohol and possibly having more suicide attempts, or actually completing a suicide attempt.
There's growing support that psilocybin, the drug in psychedelic mushrooms, helps treat people like Constanza. The Food and Drug Administration is even studying it. Here in Connecticut, lawmakers are considering decriminalizing it.
This is a product that has been shown through research to be, frankly, less harmful, less addictive than a lot of products that we already make fully legal.
People caught with a half ounce or less would be fined $150 for a first offense and up to $500 for each time after that. More importantly, the bill does not change laws against growing or selling.
Well, that's why this bill isn't a legalization bill. This bill is a decriminalization of a small amount.
Republicans on the Judiciary Committee have concerns. Some want to wait for studies. Others say they're against the idea.
I'd feel much more comfortable if we got the results from those studies.
Anything that you need a trip sitter to take seems like a bad idea to me.
Now again, as you guys can see, there are a lot of different concerns when it comes to these mushrooms. Some people don't like the fact that you need to have a trip sitter or you need to take it in an open space, because as you guys heard early on in the video, there was a guy who actually lost it and jumped off of something and they lost him. Now just a quick reminder guys, if you're getting value from this video, please do like, share and subscribe to the channel, and if you want to support us further, join the ICANN VIP Bean Club or cop some merch. Now, so far we've touched on the West Coast and the East Coast, but are other states also following suit? Places like Wisconsin, Minnesota, Rhode Island, Utah, Illinois. Are these places also riding the magic mushroom wave? Well, let's pop over to Minnesota, where the task force actually recommends the decriminalization of mushrooms.
The task force is recommending the decriminalization of magic mushrooms.
A nearly 200-page report from the Minnesota Psychedelic Medicine Task Force says psilocybin mushrooms show evidence they may improve mental health. Jason Rantala has the details.
This is a focus kind of gummy.
Logan Fleischman.
We are producing, really safe products.
Co-owns Wonderland Mushroom Dispensary in St. Paul, a shop specializing in mushroom-infused gummies and drinks that tout supposed real-life health benefits.
We're not saying that this, certainly will give you energy or certainly will make you focus, but for some people, it does help.
Fleischman does not sell magic, aka psilocybin mushrooms, that cause hallucinations and are still illegal. But news of a state task force report that lays out potential health benefits gives Fleischman hope.
Really helping with combat things like depression, anxiety, PTSD.
By a 2/3 supermajority, members of the Psychedelic Medicine Task Force are recommending the Minnesota legislature create a state-regulated clinical program for the therapeutic administration of psilocybin-containing mushrooms, remove criminal penalties for their use, and allocate more funding for research on the mushrooms and other psychedelics.
The report itself is meant to be a long-term resource for the state.
Jessica Nielsen is chair for the task force.
We do need someone in the legislature to actually introduce the bill and move it through the system.
Minnesota Republican State Senator Mark Curran, a member of the task force, is optimistic.
If we can get a true environment to have some research done and find an effective way to administer it, and we have the resources to do it here, then I'd be all for moving it forward.
The task force also looked at a clinical program for synthetic or man-made drugs like MDMA and LSD, but that did not garner enough support. There was also not enough support for a recreational market for magic mushrooms.
Now, it does seem that while some places are in support of this change, a lot of places are still against the synthetic stuff. And that's why some states are actually seeking to impose bills that'll put this into legislation. And that's what's happening over in Illinois. So let's pop over to Illinois and hear what they have to say about this.
So the CURE Act, tell us about it.
You know, first it's going to decriminalize something that we know many people depend on for struggles that they have as far as mental health or substance use disorder, or what we know is sometimes end-of-life treatment so that you could die in peace. Veterans
Taking away pain.
Correct? From cancer patients. Veterans use it for PTSD. And, you know, it's a breakthrough therapy that the FDA has approved.
Where are they finding it? If it's not, how do I find it?
Well, it's grown, and you know what? It's a natural herb or medicine that we use in America and across the world.
But it's still criminalized.
It's criminalized, and part of our House Bill 1, and now we're gaining steam in the Senate. My friend Senator Ventura has filed a bill, also a companion bill, to make it legal in Illinois, decriminalizing it so that people could receive the therapy that they need.
And we just saw Indiana's looking into something similar. There's other states that have also pushed this through, correct? Illinois is not the first.
Illinois is not the first. And what we've done in Illinois, we've taken guidance from some of our leading medical institutions like Johns Hopkins, like UCLA, and University of Alabama, that has proven that these treatments give relief to people that are struggling from things like PTSD.
Now, these are some reputable medical organizations and universities who actually have provided studies showing the benefits of these mushrooms. And you guys heard it there yourselves. Other states have already taken steps in relation to this, places like Indiana, but also Rhode Island.
New on the night team, everything that grows wild can't be used as you wish. Take mushrooms, for example. The psychedelic kind, they're illegal in Rhode Island.
But new tonight, there's two lawmakers who want to decriminalize a substance that's actually in the mushrooms that's used to treat depression. Here's the night team's Katie Benoit.
Rhode Island State Representative Brandon Potter and Senator Megan Kallman want to legalize the use of psilocybin.
The research is compelling and clear and repeated over and over and over again.
Both lawmakers say research shows the chemical can help with PTSD or depression. The House version of the bill would allow a person to possess less than 1 ounce of psilocybin. The bill would also, contingent on FDA approval, allow the chemical to be used as a treatment for chronic mental health disorders.
The state would then join a number of states that are allowing it to be used in a therapeutic setting.
According to the DEA, the mushrooms do grow in the U.S. and can be eaten or put into tea. They can cause hallucinations and an inability to discern fantasy from reality. NBC 10 spoke with the nonprofit, the Mushroom Hunting Foundation. The couple educates people about mushrooms in the Ocean State.
We come across these things, but obviously we don't sell them or even collect them.
The DEA says magic mushrooms have slender stems topped by caps with dark gills on the undersides.
The psychedelic mushrooms are in the category that we'd say is difficult to identify, experts only. In other words, if you identify it incorrectly, you could eat a poisonous mushroom.
What do you say to people who say, pot just got legalized, here's something else? They're critics of, drugs being legalized.
The war on drugs has been a total failure. And one of the issues that the war on drugs has really caused is preventing therapies from being available to a number of people for decades.
These bills still have to undergo a number of steps before they would be passed.
So I think that's a fantastic point. Some people do compare it to medical herb, and they may or may not have a good grounds for doing that. But one thing that cannot be disputed is the medical benefits that have been blocked from so many people for centuries because of the war on drugs. Now that's a big problem, obviously, especially when Big Pharma pushes their idea of safe drugs onto people, and people have noticed that that actually causes a lot more harm than good, and we're in the middle of an opioid epidemic. Now, one place that's actually legalized mushroom use is over in Colorado. Now, before we bop into Colorado, let's head over to Utah because they're not on it at all. They don't want it at all in Utah. Let's hear what they got to say.
Governor Spencer Cox is bucking a big bill in the Utah State Legislature. Fox 13 News political reporter Ben Winslow is on Capitol Hill with more.
The governor signaled the bill to legalize psilocybin is not getting past his desk. Here's what he told us at his monthly PBS News conference.
It's just not there yet. We got there with medical marijuana. I just don't believe the science is there. I don't believe we should be experimenting on 5,000 people here in our state. And I think there are some serious consequences and side effects societally as well as medically that I'm just not comfortable with.
The bill would legalize psilocybin under a strictly controlled program. Yesterday, people who say they benefited from it spoke in favor of it, urging lawmakers to pass the bill. Senate Minority Leader Luz Escamilla, who is sponsoring the bill, says she's still not giving up.
It's happening, guys. I mean, the bottom line is people are using them. We've seen places where they're selling them. And I think my idea was just going to bring a more a medical piece to it in a more restraining way and actually regulating them better. So I thought it was a better approach than what we currently have in place.
The bill will have a hearing next week, but again, without the governor's support, it's hard to see it getting very far in the final days of the legislative session.
So certain states are in support, certain governors are in support, but certain governors are definitely not in support. Now, right next to Utah is Colorado, and in Colorado, it's been decriminalized for quite some time, and mushroom use is actually on the rise.
And first up here at 5:30, brand new insight about those magic mushrooms.
5 psychedelics are now decriminalized right here in Colorado, and what's known as psilocybin therapy is now legal in the state. Fox 31's Matt Morrow here taking a deeper dive into it all. Matt.
I'll tell you, and Jeremy, what all of that means is that you're going to be hearing and maybe even seeing magic mushrooms and products with their main ingredient, psilocybin, a lot more. The drug will be legal in different products here, including gummies and chocolate, and used at so-called healing centers when they start opening in just a few months. Today, Rocky Mountain Poison and Drug Safety talked about the drugs and how Colorado, again, will likely see more of them starting this year. Calls to poison centers for psilocybin nationally have jumped more than 300% in the last few years. Here in Colorado, they now get more calls for psilocybin than ketamine, LSD, and ecstasy. Some of their concerns are with storage and kids getting into those products that really look like candy. And there are people who unintentionally take them. Plus, some people can hallucinate with it. That said, doctors say there can be some potential benefits.
In general, we think that psilocybin may be beneficial for some medical conditions, and it's really important to reiterate that. We don't have great treatments for some mental health conditions, and that has prompted the community to consider natural medicines as a treatment.
So despite the fact that there are benefits, I definitely think that it's something that needs to be managed carefully. We do have a mental health problem, not just in America, but in the world. And I think that being able to deal with this mental health problem is the first step to getting people back on the right track. But let me know what you guys think about all that. Today's topic is a really interesting one, and I want to find out what you guys think. Something else that I also want to find out what you guys think about is a $200 a year fee to use herb. So if you want to find out more about that, check that video out because it's coming up right now.